Hello, everybody. Welcome in to Pro Football Enterprises. I'm Ben Parker. That's Shane Ratliff. I hope everybody's summer is going well. We are knee deep in prospects, man. They are all over the place. And listen, Shane, I don't know about you. I started doing tons of football work in the off season 20, 23 years ago because I just wanted more football during the off season was why I was doing it. And over the years, it has translated into man, I've got a lot of time during the spring and summer when I'm not watching football to watch football. So that's where a lot of this has come from on my side. I really love it. We've got prospects all over the place. Tonight is tight ends. First of all, Shane, thank you for being here. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you for having me, Ben. And like you mentioned that, I mean, both of us are in the age bracket where you would still read something in a paper form. I used to
Yes,
grab like the Phil Steele magazine. It would come out every
absolutely.
summer. It'd have the like up and coming college guys, and that's where like you'd get a chance to see somebody like if you didn't get to see them on a national game, all of a sudden these names popped up. I used to read through that. That would be something I would search through the magazine aisle through any opportunity I had.
Absolutely. Phil Steele. I read the other magazines too. Phil Steele had the most detail. And listen, we love it. If you're watching, more than likely you're a fairly serious consummate of college football or prospects as well. It's probably why you're watching this video. So we come into this assuming that a lot of you already have some knowledge of these players, but that you'd just like to hear more opinions. And so me and Shane, we do the work, we bring more opinions, and a lot of you are doing the work in some form or another. So we sure appreciate you coming in. If you got thoughts, drop them in the comments and just add to the conversation, bring some intelligence to the game as well. Shane, we've got quite a few tight ends to cover tonight. We're not going to cover them all in depth. It's about a 12-man watch list heading into the season. Can't wait to watch some college football. And let's go ahead and get right to it. Trades Green, 6'7", 240 pounds, playing for LSU. Most of you who have watched with us before, you know I don't add offensive numbers to the tight end spot because the tight end spot tends to get a little underutilized in college football, and the tight end numbers can be a little off kilter as opposed to what NFL teams might actually want to use them for when they hit the NFL market. So that's why I leave that off. I prefer the focus and the conversation to be on them as a prospect. So Shane, go ahead and give us your first thoughts on Trades Green.
First thought for him, Ben, is a true two-sport athlete. Played for LSU's basketball team as well. For somebody his size, has outstanding speed. The basketball and the length helps with the catch radius. When you said, numbers are hard to quantify for a college tight end. Some of those numbers, though, do play into him for his negatives. Um, he had 5 drops and 51 attempts, so higher than what you'd like to see, especially with a limited route tree. Um, Listed at 240 pounds, but certainly doesn't block like it. And he had some of his worst games against the better defenses that LSU played. So I think he's a guy that's emerging with the athletic talent. This is a year where he's decided to completely stick with football. I think as he starts to pick that up, it will help. Uh, the blocking has become, in a lot of offenses in pro football, irrelevant because now you can play a true inline tight end, but a lot of tight ends are more slot players than what they ever were before. Um, and with his athletic ability, if he can secure the hands, he's a red zone weapon for anybody.
I'm really close to you here, so let me run through my notes and I'll toss it back to you here. There's a lot to like about Trades Green and a few things I don't like so good. So let me start rolling through them here. Devastating in the red zone. You alluded to that. In the red zone, this guy's a killer. Goodness gracious. I've seen them double team him and him still catch the ball. You know, like he's absolutely a killer in the red zone. Love that. I like the hands. You mentioned the drops. The drops are a problem. Okay. But when he's not dropping the football, he does a pretty good job of snatching the football and ripping the football away from defenders. So I like all of that. I like the hands from that standpoint. Hopefully he can clear up the drops, but some guys never do, man. You know, some guys they just never really do reach that level of precision, right? So, we'll see if we can clean that up. The yak is consistent, but not explosive. Not routinely. Like there's plenty of yak all the time, right? Every time he catches the ball, there's yak. So I like that. But he's not necessarily burning people up for 40-yard chunks all the time. He's got these speed bursts, and you mentioned the speed there. It is there, but he's not exactly killing people the way we've seen a few tight ends over the past 3 or 4 years killing people. Maybe we can see a little bit more explosiveness this year. Got a good slant route for a tight end. He's got a very good slant route, which means he's not only has he worked on that, but he's figured out how to use that to kind of supplement what else he does. And so I always like that. So many of these guys don't have advanced route trees, right? But kind of like an edge rusher, if you've got one or two moves that you can work each other, if you're a receiver and you've got a couple of different routes that you can work, hey, you got something now. You can kind of off balance the defenders that are trying to shut you down. So he's got a good slant route. Not especially smooth or fluid to me. It's fairly average. The athleticism is there in spades, but when you watch him, it's not particularly smooth or fluid. Maybe that's because, as you mentioned, he spent a lot of time in basketball as well, and maybe with more devotion to football, maybe we see him get more fluid. Not a great field versus zone. I really didn't see him doing a great job settling into zones. And again, maybe that's a football commitment time experience thing, but just haven't yet seen him settle into zones great. But against man, goodness gracious, it's like anytime they want to just throw it on up to him, they've got a real high percentage chance of catching that. All right, of ripping down a 5-yarder or 15-yarder. So that's okay. And then the blocking is very inconsistent. It ranges from average to very bad. You already mentioned the blocking. Now, again, it's not a nail in the coffin because, like you said, some of these NFL teams, they'll throw a guy out there in that tight end slot position. They don't ever really ask him to do too much blocking. If they need a blocker, they'll bring in the blocking tight end off the bench, So it's not the end of the world. But since we are evaluating these people, Trey'Dez's dream block. Every once in a while, you'll see some good blocking, but most of the time, it's just bad blocking, is what I've seen out of Green. So that's my notes. Kick it back to you for the final word on Trey'Dez Green.
Well, I think you mentioned two key things in there, Ben. So the lack of kind of awareness in the zone, three of those five drops came in zone coverage too. So balls that you would normally expect your tight end to
Okay.
catch because you didn't have somebody laying right on top of them. But you also brought up the red zone. Now versus Ole Miss, he split a double team, jumped over the corner and jumped over the safety and caught the ball. On that same drive, he dropped a 5-yard completion with nobody around him. It's like you said, when he wants, those hands are there. I think it's more of a concentration issue than it is truly having bad hands in this situation. Um, I will be very interested to see what his offensive numbers are like now with Lane Kiffin as the head
Yeah.
coach there, and he'll bring some other things in uh, and a non-injured quarterback for the first time for him for a little while too. So I think he has the ability to put up some huge numbers. I also think, like you said, it's an oddity to me when I watched him. Not super fluid, which is normally you say like guys that play other sports and come to football, they're very fluid, but there's not a developed route tree. I He doesn't have a developed route tree, and then he also his moves are not as fluid as you would expect from somebody that's played other sports.
Yes, which leads me into, and I'll come right back to you for this before we move on. I've got him as a second round kind of a guy right now.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he's got the talent and the athleticism to move into the first round, but I need to see him work on his game some more. And if he can do that, then I'd be first round interested. If he can't, if he kind of flatlines, then I may drop him, for lack of improvement, right? But at the moment, I've got him maybe as a 50th pick in the draft, kind of a guy with
Mm-hmm.
a range up or down. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I think you're right in there, Ben. The athletic talent is going to drive people to see him. The numbers he's going to be able to put out and the tape he shows this year are really going to be where you put him. I haven't seen he's not a full enough package for me to say he'd ever be a first rounder. So
Okay.
I think his peak is right around where you're saying that 50th. If he has an outstanding season, maybe he's even an earlier second rounder. But I think with the knocks on him, the lack of blocking, I think if you're going to take a draft pick in the first round on a tight end, they need to be a complete athlete in the NFL today. So I think, like you said, high second round. I have him listed right now as a early third rounder.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm not asking him to improve in every category this year, but I would love to see as he's worked out during the late winter, the spring, and the summer. I would love for him to at least have improved a couple of these categories, right? Let's eliminate the drops. Let's turn that blocking into a real power asset for you, and maybe let's add another refined route. If I saw those things, I'd be more interested in him. So stay tuned to check Tradez Green. Moving on here, Jamari Johnson from Oregon, 6'5", 255 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and run through my notes on him, and then I'll hand it over to you, Shane. Consistent yak and occasionally explosive. He's not, to me, consistently bursting and exploding past people, but it does show up at times. So he's got it. I'm just not sure he's got the speed burst to kill people. The speed is good. It's not elite. I do see him. There are times where he'll catch the sideline and boy, he's gone for 40 yards, but that's not all the time. You think to some of the other tight ends we've watched over the past 3 or 4 seasons with the Brock Bowers, with his fluid and athleticism. You think about Warren coming from Penn State. You think about the kid from Michigan. I mean, we've seen probably 4 guys, even last year's Oregon tight end, who you did see kind of that consistent burst. I don't consistently see it from Jamari, so maybe he'll show more of it this year. Solid hands, tough catches. I do like that. He'll make tough catches. Very position flexible. I'll see him line up at slot. I'll see him line up at the tight end. He'll even kind of line up as an offset fullback. So he can move around all within that box. I do like that. I didn't see him wide out very much, so I'm not sure that's really a huge part of his game, but that's okay. He can hit all them other spots. Blocking is an asset. In fact, it's a real part of the offense. They used his blocking a lot. It's not quite elite level blocking, but it's consistently a part of his game. He seems to take pride in it. There are times he'll really lay a hit on people. Other times it's a little sloppy, but still the effort is there. The technique is usually there. So the blocking, they made it a real part of the offense last year. My final note on him is now that Sadiq is gone, can he carry a larger target share? And if he can, then I'd be much more interested in Jamari Johnson. So we'll see. Does he have that true NFL speed, athleticism burst to get a larger target share when colleges don't always devote a lot of target share to tight ends anyway? So we'll see. That's my thoughts on Johnson. I'll tell everybody where I'm interested in drafting him here in a second, but over to you now.
So, Ben, for me, Jamar Johnson is kind of the old school transitional tight end, high school quarterback. They find out you're not going to play quarterback in college, move him to tight end. Like you mentioned, I don't see a huge burst out of him, but he averaged about 16 yards a catch. So you're getting a
Yep.
first down every time you touch the ball. Any offensive coordinator is going to be happy with that. I would the comment you made about the blocking. I listed him as modest blocking, but very interested, which is normally not the thing that you get. I think as he gets more comfortable in this and he becomes the number one guy, I think he's going to get better at this because you mentioned it, Ben. There's times where he flat out lays a guy out, and you can see how amped up he is that he set the tone for that run game. Um, there's, I never saw him in a bad position. It's sloppy. There's a lot of things that can be changed, but
Yeah.
he's willing to get in there, which is something that there's a lot of tight ends on this list that they have no interest in that blocking part.
Hmm.
I think the most important thing for him is, as you said, so he had the most athletic offensive weapon at tight end ahead of him last year. Um, Oregon has lost its offensive coordinator. Will Stein to the University of Kentucky as a head coach. I'll be interested to see how that transition works and how they keep on that. But I see him playing a large part in this offense this year. Um, I think his numbers can only go up. And I think as he becomes more comfortable in that situation, like you said, Ben, I think they're going to use him in even more ways. Because if you're a former high school quarterback, I would think they'd feel very comfortable handing the ball off to him like they did to Sadiq on tight end rounds. Um, Obviously, he can throw the ball. They had Sadiq do that last year as well. So, I mean, there's some options for him to have some big plays and get his name out there again this year.
Yeah, I'm very interested in Jamari Johnson. At the moment, I've just got him as a day two kind of a guy. So anywhere in second, third round, I'm open to talking about it. I don't have him pushed over into the Saturday rounds of drafting right now. But again, if he has a flat line season, then I'm just going to push him on back. But if he increases his numbers, shows me more of that refinement, then man, day two, second, third round, I'm very interested in Jamari Johnson. You feel the same way, or do you have him lower or higher than that?
No, I have him right around there, Ben.
Okay.
He's one where I think that because of some of the traits that he has and playing in an offense that just had a tight end drafted that high, I think he may leak higher up. But I think talent wise and what we've already seen on film, I agree with where you have him.
All right. It's Jamari Johnson looking forward. By the way, listen, I've said this before. I try to give a fair assessment of these players, okay? Like y'all don't come to us to hear rainbows and roses, okay? Y'all come to us for opinions and evaluations. So I try my best to do it. But it's a privilege to get to study these guys, okay? They're all great athletes. I mean, every one of them. The fact that the NFL is even thinking about them puts them into a great athlete category. And most of them have worked very hard to get to where they are. Okay. So I really enjoy getting to study these guys, watch the teams play, and watch them go to the NFL. So, but we are going to try to give good evaluations here. We're not just going to always sunshine this thing. Terrence Carter, Texas Tech, 6'2", 245. Shane, give us the lowdown on Terrence.
So this is where the interesting part about tight ends becomes, Ben, because Terrence Carter is really, I would say, an H back rating as a tight end. And then even then, he doesn't do a lot of H back stuff. He's really a slot wide receiver that's a little bit bigger than he should be. But the thing that you watch Terrence Carter, and like you said, Ben, it's hard to put numbers up for the tight ends, but his yards after catch is like 370 yards after the catch. Like when he touches the ball, he's going to get more than you expect him to. I mean, obviously, you look at him, he's like a bowling ball for the size that he is. He is a deep threat, though, a lot better speed than you would expect. Um, the thing for him also that really shows up is he had his biggest games when Texas Tech needed it the most. So they knew he was going to be the guy they were going to. He was an offensive weapon for them, and he still performed on each of those. As I said, he's definitely a slot. He's not going to play inland for you. I think he's more agile than he is fast. He's great in that 1-2 steps and then get free. He can work himself around in zones. He can break run patterns off quickly to get you like an open space. But when I watch him, I don't see him flying by people. I think his hands are okay. I don't think they're great. And I think Texas Tech offense makes it hard to project him for a tight end because it's not your average offense. They still use wide splits down there in Texas, so you're also even on that you're blocking a guy far out. It gives you a little bit of a better angle on things like that. I'll be interested to see with the changeover at Texas Tech and the fluid situation at quarterback about how much of a weapon he'll be this year for them.
All right. So let me trot up my notes and I'll come back to you on where you're thinking about drafting him. I got to start with the yak, the yards after catch, because that's where you started. I love it. The yak is excellent, and I didn't even have that statistic in my head, but when I saw it on tape, it just explodes off the screen. every time the guy catches the ball, it's that first step or two, like you said, and he's got these huge chunk plays everywhere. No, they're listen, they're not. He's not out running defensive backs, but when he catches the ball and he finds these holes in the defense, boy, he's gone for 15, 20, 30 yards. If they're sitting at the 40-yard line, the other team's 40. They're a threat to score because of him. He can scoot through that mid part of the field. So love the yak. It is excellent. And you already said it. The hands are good, not great. They're fine. It's not like he's always ripping the ball away, but it's a good set of hands. I think it's very NFL worthy. No height advantage to me. You mentioned the bowling ball effect. I'm not going to say he's not 6'2", because it's always tough to tell that looking on the field. But when you see him being guarded by linebackers and defensive backs, you don't really see where the height advantage is at. So whether he's 6'2" or not, he doesn't seem to be elevating necessarily like Trey'Dez Greenwood. No real height advantage. To me, a zone killer. I just thought he killed zones, not
Mm-hmm.
only settling sometimes in holes, but really just running through the zones. He really seems to be super comfortable at that. And that seemed to be where so much of his chunk plays came from. And you mentioned that Texas Tech offense there really seems to utilize him doing that, just kind of ripping through his own, catches the ball, and boom, he's already past the linebackers, right? So it's going to take the defense a few yards to catch him. By that time, he's eaten up quite a few yards. The blocking I thought was better than I expected. When I watched all the highlights of him, I was like, this guy can't block. Well, he does a fair job of blocking compared to some other guys we've seen. Now they're not going to use him for that much. He don't really have the size build for that. The blocking's okay, and they just did not ask him to do that much. I thought he struggled versus man defense a little bit. I'm not saying he can't beat it. It just seemed like he likes the freedom of being able to move through space, and he doesn't really seem to vertically be able to go up and express himself that way. So it seems like he's just a lot more comfortable ripping through zones, which, by the way, you can earn a lot of money in the NFL ripping through zones if you're good enough at it. So I'm not knocking that, but that's what I had on him. So back to you. Where would you draft him at right now? And any final thoughts you got on him?
Yeah, I had him as a third rounder right now, Ben. I think his numbers show for that offense. The thing I worry about is the last thing you mentioned. So against man, you can see where linebackers, even defensive backs that got their hands on him early and pressed
Yeah,
him, a real struggle for him to get off the ball. Um, where, like you said, he thrives in that zone, and I think you hit it well. You can make an awful lot of money running mesh through zones. There's a lot of guys that are catching checks in the NFL for that.
yeah,
The thing that scares me though is that in the NFL, there's also 6'6" outside linebackers that run faster than he does right now that are
yeah.
not going to let him get off the ball. And if an offensive coach has to have him as the guy that's blocking that linebacker, they're going to send that guy on a blitz as well. So I think for what he does, he's going to do great. But I think he is kind of the first segment of guys where I would never draft him to be my number one tight end. He's going to be an auxiliary piece to a tight end that can play more. You take that Ben Johnson offense. The Rams have started to use more 13 personnel as well when wide receivers got hurt. But like the Bears right now, they'd play three tight ends if they could on an
Mm-hmm.
awful lot of downs because what that opens up. And Terrence Carter is one of those guys where you would fit him in there when you already have an established person because he'll be able to fit in that zone. He'll be able to catch the ball, but you don't want him to have to be your focal point of your offense. Can you do it at, like you said, I don't know if he's a true 6'2". Um, I don't think he's not George Kittle. He's not that type of thing where you go like, yeah, is he a little bit smaller than everybody else? But I think he can hold his ground. So I think he falls, and I would say I think third round is a high one for him. He'd be a guy I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to fall depending on how his offensive numbers are this year.
It's interesting because I'm going to pause it for a quick little conversation here. At the moment, I don't have a tight end projected for the first round for this year's NFL draft, and I'm wide open to, one or more of those guys changing my mind as the college football season rolls on. But at the moment, I just don't have one. I've got tight ends I like, but I just don't have a
Hmm.
guy that's popping like that. I've got Terrence Carter again as a day two pick. I'm interested in it mid-second round. I'll start thinking about him. Um, but I just don't have him that high. I know other people that do, and that's fine. I just don't have him. So I'm interested, but the tight end group, I just don't have that top end guy or two guys sitting there right now, like we've seen really for the last three drafts now, I think. So
Hmm.
that's just where I'm at with Terrence Carter. Without us divulging all the other tight ends, are you any different? Do you have any tight ends in the first round at the moment?
No, I'm kind of in the same boat you are, Ben. The I do have two tight ends that I think have a chance to slide into that round, but I'll tell you one of them who we're going to cover later. I think it's more of a name factor and what he can do as opposed to the NFL really evaluating him at that high level. Sometimes we have somebody we're just going to kind of go through, but like a Loss and Lucky, every tight end before you at Georgia has been drafted in the first round. So like, are people going to watch you starting tight end at Georgia and give you a better representation of maybe what your playing style is? Yes. If you're a tight end at Iowa, are you going to get more looks than your average tight end? The answer to
Right.
that's yes. So
Yes.
like, if you fall into that because people can go like, look, every tight end we've drafted from Iowa in the last 7 years has been a productive offensive weapon for their team, they're more likely to take a risk on you. A lot of the guys that we have on this list and this year that are showing up, they don't have that type of background right now. I would say probably the guys that are not draft eligible. There's some up and coming sophomores that I think if they were eligible, they would get more press than what we're talking about with this junior and senior class. Um, I think unless somebody really blows up this year, it's going to be hard for them to have a first rounder.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the conversation you had a minute ago, which was I started it by talking about how I didn't like his work versus man, and then you talked about bigger linebackers being able to kind of knock him off, and sometimes even defensive backs being able to get in there, jam up, knock him off. It's one reason, and Austin's a huge part of this show. I tend to be biased in favor of taller receivers, and Austin tends to be more willing to use the smaller guys. One reason I'm a little biased against some of the shorter guys is because you can so often, speed or not, knock them off their route, rough them up, and in man they're just not as comfortable. Now, obviously a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba is able to work off of that. He don't mind, but that's not your average, smaller kind of a guy, and so many of them just don't like the contact or kind of get intimidated by it or haven't figured out how to work off of it. So when you come out to a guy like Terrence Carter, I would love to see him this year get more comfortable with physical man, work off of that, figure out a thing or two you can do to catch the football off of that in spite of, whatever height you are, get more comfortable with it, whether that's a little bit more weight room or route refinement, whatever. I would love to see that. And then then I can start moving him up the list, but that's where I'm at right now on Terrence Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Final thought on Terrence, and we'll go on.
Well, I think you hit on it, Ben. Well, like I said before, I think he's not going to project as a number one for anybody. I think he fills the role of that second release tight end, the guy that you can get to kind of fill in those spots. I think he's a guy that if you have an offense where you do use like an H back slash fullback, I think he really fits that mold in the offense. His blocking is subpar because he's not going to be used in like a real run game one, but you can get that open. And the other thing you mentioned, Ben, with your more inclination to look for the bigger, taller wide receiver. The NFL has changed to where, nickel and dime is more of the base defense than it ever has been before. And that's why the tight end position is seeing a resurgence in offensive numbers because now if you can get a bigger guy matched up against the smaller defensive back that's out there, that's not getting that push on the line, now you really start to open things up for your offense. So, um, I think for Carter, like we said, the thing that's going to hurt him the most is what is this quarterback situation at Texas Tech going to become?
Yeah.
Um, and that, unfortunately for him, is really going to affect his draft status because there's not a athletic number. He doesn't have the size to where like you're just going to get him at the combine and go, oh my God, he's 6'7" and runs a 4.4. Yeah, of course we're going to draft him. He's not going to pop those numbers out for you. So he needs help. He needs to be demonstrated on what he can do to help an offense.
Yeah. And I like him. I really do. But I think what you said is accurate. You need some kind of a mainstay, either big tight end one or a big uh, wide receiver one who's got the size, and then he comes in and just cleans house and all the underneath zone
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But yeah, I don't see him as primary option at all, even though I really do like him. So let's move on. Garrett Oakley from Kansas State, 6'5", 245 pounds. I have quite a few notes on him. They're a little bit different than what I've had for the other guys, but go ahead and tell us your take on Garrett.
So the thing for me, Ben, that sticks out differently from what we've talked about anybody, this in my mind is the top blocking tight end that we're going to talk about all night. It helps being at Kansas State because that's what you're going to do. I think he's more of an all-around athlete than he really is a tight end right now. There's times where you don't see him as comfortable out in the route tree as I'd like him to be. But like I said, if you want a guy that you're going to be able to draft and put him on the side and help that power run game, you go to Garrett Oakley right away. He's more athletic than he looks. Um, he didn't have outstanding numbers. Kansas State offense is kind of boomer bust the last couple of years. They do use a ton of tight ends though. So they're a three tight end formation. They're a fullback. They're two tight end. They're gonna get people out there and moving. Um, I think this year for him, he's going to become more of an offensive weapon, and I think he gets the ball to him a lot more this year, so he can show out. But my biggest note that I wrote for Garrett, this is your '90s tight end. This is a 6'5" guy. They have him listed at 240. He plays heavier than that in my mind when you watch him block. Um, Catches the ball when he's supposed to, and is not afraid to run somebody over when he has to.
Yeah, listen, to me, this guy looks different. Now, I still don't have a first round grade on him, but this guy just looks different. Matter of fact, to me, he looks like he already has a pro style game, like he's already kind of a ready made pro, if you will. So here's my notes, and then we'll talk about him. Runs well, smooth and natural. It just everything he does to me looks efficient and smooth. Like he's not just efficient, but it seems very smooth and natural to me. I really love the hands. You mentioned him catching everything he's supposed to. I think it's just a good set of hands. He's not hard to tackle. I did notice that. Now, he will
Mm-hmm.
run people over, but generally speaking, if they can get to his legs, he's done for. It's not like he's going to shake and bake people. Lots of breakout routes, and by that I mean where he's blocking first and then breaking out on a
Mm-hmm.
route. Lots of those, but very effective at it. The I He does not have a complex route tree, but I thought all the routes he ran were good and clean and crisp. Like he just seemed like they were good routes, the ones that he did have. And then the blocking, yeah, consistently good blocking. I mean, it's good clean. And it's like everything that he does, he does not have an explosive game, and he doesn't pop on film to me. But it's just like everything that he does do seems like it's natural and he's worked at it. It just seems like it's really clean and crisp. And then he seems like a smart player too, just as you watch him move
Mm-hmm.
around the field during the plays. Seems like a smart guy who understands the offense and what they're trying to do. This is a guy to me that if he does have a big year, and you mentioned that you thought he could, I think he can handle a lot more targets than what he got. I think he could help them a lot more. I kind of wonder, I don't always say this about tight ends, but I kind of wonder why they didn't get him the ball more last year. It just looked to me like he could have helped the offense if they'd have done it,
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this is a guy who may not get first round buzz, but this is a guy that a lot of NFL teams I think would be glad to have. I really do. So I've got him as a day two guy, second, third round. And it's not like I can go point people to the film and say, man, go check this out. You're going to love it. it doesn't burst, but man, everything's just good. I'd be very interested in this guy, especially in this year's draft. So that's what I've got on Garrett Oakley. I'll kick it back to you for more thoughts on him, but I do like him
I,
here.
I think, like you said, Ben. So I have him listed as a day two guy as well, but uh, like I said, I think he's an all around athlete. He might be a guy that has a great season this year, and the combine makes him look even more attractive
Yeah.
because I think he's a guy that's going to put up really good numbers. As you said, smart player. He'll be great in the interview room. He'll be able to tell you his blocking technique. He'll be able to tell you what the
Yes.
wide receiver was doing on this play. I think he's going to be able to help himself a lot with that. I also think you mentioned it, Ben. Sometimes offensive coordinators get too smart for their own good. You know, you throw the ball to Garrett, he catches it, we get a touchdown, and you go, "Hey, yeah, I know, but like they're probably going to cover it this time." But you go back and you watch the film, and you're like, "No, he was open. We should have thrown the ball to him five more times that game and see where we put ourselves."
Right.
Um, I think he's going to get more option routes this year. Do I think defenses know about him? Yes, they do. But I think as he gets um, older, stronger, I think he's going to become more and more of a weapon. Like I said, they love to use extra tight ends and fullbacks in the offense, and I think they're going to try to move him around a little bit and make it harder for people to get a hold of him.
Yeah, you mentioned people defenses knowing that he exists, and you're right. One of the frustrating parts of football is if you're a good player, defenses are going to do their best to just take you out of the equation, and they usually can, unless you're just one of the all-time greats. They can usually take you out of the equation, force people to go somewhere else. But I'd kind of sort of rather see them operate off of that foundation of, hey, let's get Garrett some focus in the offense this year, and let's force defenses to readjust a little bit, and then we'll work off of that to whatever else then opens up. Listen, I know it's not always that simple, but I would love to see him get at least more of that. Instead of being, listen, on some plays, I'm not even sure he was an option at all, other than a check down. I'd love to see him be, option two on more of these plays, as opposed to, just block and then check down underneath. So we'll see. That is Garrett Oakley, Kansas State. Benjamin Brommer. You can see the Iowa State uniform came over, of course, with the coaching staff to Penn State. He's 6'7", the weight 255. Shane, I haven't got so far in my studies as to have a good set of notes on Brommer, so I'm just going to give my impressions and then I'll let you talk on him. Big guy, uses that size, strong. I like the strength here. I really do. When I've watched him in game, I like the strength. This too seems to be a smart player as well. So I've got the strength, I've got the intelligence here, and then obviously coming over from Penn State with a good coaching staff. So, but I haven't developed my notes farther on Brommer than that. I know you do have a little bit more set of notes on that. So go ahead and take it away on Benjamin Brommer.
So the first thing that pops up for me, Ben, is he was a MAC League finalist last year, so people already have him projected as a high level tight end.
Yep.
You mentioned the size. He is a mismatch nightmare, especially in the Iowa State offense, which is now going to become the Penn State offense. They do a lot of two tight ends. He is a guy that runs around and will get the ball to him. He's also a guy that when he signed with Iowa State, it was a huge Midwestern deal because he was like all state in everything he attempted to do in Nebraska. And Nebraska threw as much as they personally could to try to get him to come there, and he still chose Iowa State.
Wow.
Um, so the oddity, though, is you come from this Midwestern thing. Iowa State, it's known for blocking. He is not a blocker. That is not what he's there for. He is physical, but he is not there to block. He doesn't hide that fact, and it didn't look like they tried to hide it either. Um, the interesting thing is this is a senior move for him, Iowa State to Penn State, but you mentioned it, Ben. The entire offensive coaching staff, his quarterback, the other tight end, everybody went to Penn State. So is it really a coaching change and a situational change, or did you just move to a bigger stadium with more talent around you? I think this is something that's going to help him, though, because for having the same quarterback, Rocco Becht, who we talked about earlier
Yes.
in the year, he now has more offensive weapons around him. So when he was at Iowa State, you could plan to cover him and not have to worry about a lot of other people. The wide receivers, the running backs, the other talent around him at Penn State makes him even more dangerous because now you can't just double and try to beat him off the line, because if you do, you're leaving somebody else that's really dangerous in position to make plays against you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And listen, the blocking thing, there are times where I'll count off points for that, but usually only if it's tied to something else. If I look at a guy and he's not even trying to block, and then I look at some of his other plays and I can just see that he's sloppy, he doesn't really seem to care about improving his game. Then I go back to the blocking and I add that in. I say, well, this guy just doesn't care about developing as a player, right? You can see he'd rather be off with the girls during the off season, right? Instead of in the film or the weight room. Or if I see that this guy just doesn't seem to have a lot of care for his teammates. You watch him during the games and it's like, man, this guy doesn't seem to care about his teammates a whole lot. He's kind of a me guy. Then I go back and see that the blocking is crap. I add
Mm-hmm.
that to the idea that, hey, this is a me guy. This isn't a team guy. But, I don't get those things from Brahmer. What I do get from Brahmer is exactly what you said. And again, I don't have the notes on him, but watching him in the games, I agree. This is a good move for him to go to Penn State. Obviously, he's part of a whole entourage, a parade migration of people moving from Iowa State to Penn State, but it's the way college football works these days. So, at the moment, where do you have Brahmer possibly going in the draft?
See, I have him as he's a round two guy for me, Ben, because I think you mentioned it. It's the teammates love him and he'll get physical when he needs to. Like in the offense in Iowa State, they would split him out wide. So his job was to block a wide receiver. They didn't ask him to block a defensive end. They didn't ask him to do those things
Mm-hmm.
because that's not where his talent is. You're going to get an NFL team that's going to see what he can do red zone wise, real good speed, all around athlete. Um, and he can get some serious yards in the NFL. He's another guy where I think he's going to test really well too. Um, and if he does manage to put, from what people have said, the biggest change at Penn State too is that they brought in the strength and conditioning staff as well, and that guys have put on some serious weight. He's a guy that if he puts on serious weight and can keep the rest of the athletic package he's got, that makes him even more dangerous. And he's going to have a ton of eyes on him because this Penn State team, now that Matt Campbell's there, um, I think people are really going to be watching this program this year, and that's more eyes for him. It helps him get involved in everything else.
That's Benjamin Brahmer. Check him out at Penn State this year. Next up is a guy. I do not necessarily have him as tight end six. Okay, just to be clear, if you're in the audience and you're like, "Who's this Peter Clark guy?" Y'all sneaking in here. All right, but I do like him. I've got him right now as a day three guy, so a Saturday kind of a guy with the chance to move up, but definitely for me draftable. Main reason I wanted to throw him in here tonight and go through him in detail is because he plays for Temple. We just don't get a whole lot of chances to cover legitimate NFL prospects from the University of Temple. So I'm excited tonight to present Peter Clark. Excuse me, 6'6", 265 pounds. And like I mentioned before, he plays for Temple. So let me run through the notes here and then I'll hand him over to you. The speed for his size is fairly average. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like he's going to explode, but the speed is there. Really uses his size and height advantage for catching the football. He really seems to understand how to use both his body, and it's not like he has some great vertical leap, but his height and his body, he really seems to understand how to use that for catching the football. So I like that. By the way, this guy seems to really enjoy football. It kind of seems to show up every time he catches the ball, especially when he catches it for a first down, and then heaven forbid he score a touchdown. He just really looks like he enjoys himself out there. So that doesn't always pop through on tape. Some guys really do love the game, and it just doesn't show. It seems to show for him. Excellent working the seams. I didn't see another tight end in this year's group that seem to be as good at working the seams, and that's not always a straight route. Sometimes it's like a straight then turn curl route, working the defense, right, finding the holes. the seam work seemed to be just outstanding for him. And again, he's playing at Temple, so it's not like he's playing the best in the business every week. But I did like the seam work. I thought that seam work was just outstanding. And then I mentioned settling into holes. I think he's very good at settling into holes in the zone. Boy, I just watched him do that time after time after time. And that's something that can complement the seam work. Again, I just don't see a top 2 round kind of explosiveness or athleticism to him. But you're talking about a good working tight end and a guy that is draftable. When I see him know how to use his size, when I see him work the seams, and when I see him, if the seam route is not there, settle into a zone route or just settle into a hole. I like that. To me, the blocking is very good, not elite. I thought the blocking was very good when I watched him do that as well. So good package here. Perhaps missing that top tier cream of the crop speed, athleticism, for the first 2 rounds. But this is a draftable tight end that I had to talk about him coming in here from Temple. So, any thoughts you have on Peter Clark?
So some interesting things that you kind of mentioned too, Ben. You mentioned the joy that he has for playing. It's probably, I would say, even more interesting because this is a non-American. This Peter Clark started playing football at the NFL's London Academy
Wow.
about 3 years ago, uh, and so the love that he has for that showed up for me. He had one drop the entire season.
Mm,
So for a guy that's not accustomed to football, for him to only have a single drop, and like you said, he doesn't have a real expansive route tree, but people know he's
right.
the one they're going to get the ball to, and he plays up to that. You said, Ben, the concerns obviously are you're at Temple, so you're not always playing against elite talent. And when you are playing against elite talent, it's probably already 73-6 in favor of the other team when you're Temple. You get a lot of homecoming calls to be the Temple Owls. Um, I mentioned simple route tree. He's only had one season of constant play, and that was last year to put these numbers up. The other thing that people are really talking about right now for him is that word is that some elite programs offered him an awful lot of money to leave Temple,
Wow.
to move up a level, to get that. Some people see that as a knock on him for not taking that chance. For me, everything I've read about Peter Clark is that he stuck with Temple because they were the first ones that offered him. Uh, and for him to be a foreigner and get an opportunity to play college football, he wanted to stick by them because they stuck by him. So I don't keep it as a knock, like you said. Though if he had the thing for me is he's big, like he is big. So
Yes.
when you say like his speed, like you said, for the problem is there's not a lot of tight ends his size.
No.
But if you're talking about a defensive tackle that's like 278, then he's got real athletic talent. So
Right.
he plays in that like we talked about Georgia tight ends before, but like Washington playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's
Yes.
not Peter Clark isn't the 6'8", almost 400-pound monster that Washington is.
Right.
But this is the guy that not only has the athletic talent to play tight end, but when you consider that he blocks as well as he does and he has absolutely no real background in football, you would think if you get him in a system where he can start to work on that more and more, it's going to get better and better. I think his numbers are going to show. The thing for him is, Temple is still going to have a bad year, and people will still say his numbers come through that. So he'll fight against that the whole time. But like you said, I think he's one of the more interesting stories in this tight end group. And I think he'll keep people watching Temple, which, like you said, Temple is not normally on our film session unless it's somebody running by their defenders.
Yeah, I believe they played Oklahoma this past year, and that was pretty much. You're lying about they get a lot of homecoming calls. That's a great one. I like that. Here's what we're gonna do. Again, this is a watch list, so our goal is to throw out as broad a net as we reasonably can without naming the top two tight ends for all 138 schools. Okay, so that's our goal here, is to do a reasonable watch list. So what we're going to do, we're going to throw out about six more names here, and then I'll have Shane go back and mention a guy or two off that list that he would like to just give an extra shout out to. Okay, so DJ Voname out of Iowa, continuing the tradition of Iowa tight ends, as you alluded to earlier, 6'4", 240 pounds. Dylan Wade out of Central Florida. I wanted to get to his tape work before this show, and I just ran out of dang time, okay? But I promise over the summer, I will get to Dylan Wade, and you'll see me come out with something on him at some point. 6'2", 240. Jeremiah Hasley for Duke, 6'3", 245 pounds. Decker DeGraff, Washington Huskies, 6'3", 250 pounds. Brett Norfleet out of Missouri, standing at 6'6" and 260 pounds. And then a guy that you mentioned earlier in the show, Lawson Lucky, 6'4", 240. I will say, I really liked Lucky a year ago. I like him now, but the production is not there. If you take out the Ole Miss game from last year,
Correct.
he almost wasn't even on the darn field. Okay. So, until he shows me something production wise, I just can't say anything else about him in support of trying to get him drafted. But I do like the body type. I do like the athleticism, skill set type that I'm seeing, but it hasn't yet translated into any kind of production. Until it does, go show me something, Lawson. All right, so Shane, we've rattled off about six tight ends there. Give me a guy or two. We'll go back and finish off the show that way.
Well, I think the one that sticks out to me, Ben, and we kind of already hit on these tight end factories, is DJ. Um, I think for the tight end position, he has elite speed. He led Iowa in basically every pass catching offensive category as well, which normally these Iowa tight ends take like a year or two to try to demonstrate what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, Plays at Iowa. The interesting thing for him is, again, though, it seems like 240 pounds has kind of become the stock weight you just say a tight end is. So
Yeah.
that way they say that he's not too light, but he's not too heavy. There's a lot of guys I'd be real interested to see what they actually are. Um, he, again, is one of these split tight ends, but what he does is get open. He's going to be a guy that people are going to watch. Again, you're an Iowa tight end. They haven't drafted one that hasn't worked out yet. So you're going to get eyes on you no matter what.
Yes.
The other one you mentioned, Lawson Lucky, Ole Miss. You watch that Ole Miss game, you think he might be the greatest tight end ever. Three touchdowns, but literally that game ends and he disappears.
Disappeared.
There are other tight ends on there, and this is the case too at Georgia. They've always had a number one and a number two.
Yeah.
Lucky has those three tight ends, and then he just disappeared. They didn't go back to him. They didn't get him involved. He's another guy that can absolutely fly. He's undersized for what he is, but they've had good luck with that at Georgia. But
Yeah.
like I said, Ben, if you saw that Ole Miss game, you would go, well, why isn't this guy the top? This guy should be top 10 pick. Like he dominated that game, and then just through a series of Oscar Delp, was the tight end in front of him. Oscar Delp had a good year, but
Yeah.
nowhere where you see a guy explode in a game like that, then for him not to have any yardage after that.
No.
People are going to be watching him because he might just be one of those snake in the grasses. Like he catches fire this year and has an absolutely great season, or he's going to be a guy that's a one-game wonder where he'll always be able to talk to people about that day he put it to Ole Miss, but never reached his real level. The other thing that's interesting about him, his brother is also on Georgia's team as a tight end as well. So some good bloodlines, and like I
Wow.
said, the thing for him there's no after the catch, small position wise, and like I said,
Yeah.
basically all his yards. If you're Ole Miss, you're going to cover this guy. Everybody else was perfectly okay against him.
Yeah, that was wild. And listen, I've heard and read enough because I did the film on Lucky a year ago and liked him. I've heard and read enough over the past 3 or 4 months. I know there's NFL people that are interested in Lucky,
Hmm.
but we can all be I and them can be interested all we want until he shows us something on the darn field besides an Ole Miss game. Nothing's going to happen. So we'll see. Let's see if he can pop this year. That'll be Lucky out of Georgia. So anyway, if you're in the audience and you're like, dang it, why didn't you mention this other tight end? Well, go ahead and mention it in the comments right now. Go ahead and post it. There are more good tight ends out here than what we've listed, and we know that. And we know statistically that there will be more tight ends drafted than what we've even gone over tonight. Okay. So there will be more, but we did want to get out an initial summer watch list heading into the season. So if you've got more names that you want to trot out, put them there in the comments and further the conversation as well. Shane, it has been fun. It always is. Any last thoughts here before we shut it down for the night, man?
The only thing I did want to mention, Ben, and I have a feeling that somebody that has watched this may mention him as well. Walker Lyons, transfer from USC to BYU.
Yes.
Um, has a brother as a quarterback who's great as well, but he had some great games for USC, and then has made this move. Family is Mormon to begin with. BYU was a thing. He took his Mormon mission as well. Um, an older player, but you could see BYU the last couple of years, they've been in it to win it. So he could have a huge year for them. He'd be a guy I'd be interested. Also has great size. So the thing that will be a knock against him is he'll be an older draft pick because he has already served that Mormon mission.
No, you're right about the age. And listen, though, that notwithstanding, hey, maybe that pulls you down. It doesn't mean you can't get drafted. So if he pops, and
Mm-hmm.
there's every reason to think that he could, if he pops, I love the BYU coaching staff, man. You talk about one heck of a coaching staff there, and they've been putting people in the NFL. So it's not like, the NFL has to be like, oh, yeah, BYU might trot out somebody. No, they're putting people in the NFL the past few seasons, and some of them have been pass catchers. A lot of them have been pass catchers, actually. So, yeah, that's an excellent name to trot out there. Don't be surprised if you don't see that coming up in the season. All right, Shane, excellent work as always. We have more prospect groups coming all summer long. We've got cornerbacks coming. We've got defensive ends coming. Running backs will be coming up soon here. So stay tuned. We'll do watch list and prospect list all at the same time. This is Pro Football Enterprises. We're in cahoots with the Box Score Network. So have a great one. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.